Breaking news from the Las Vegas Strip. Federal agents have just shut down the Vertex, the most expensive casino in Nevada. Authorities confirmed that 30...
Las Vegas is a city that never sleeps. But at 4:17 a.m. on a Tuesday in October, the beating heart of the Strip stopped cold. The tourists playing slot machines at the Vertex didn't hear a jackpot alarm. They heard the sound of glass shattering as an armored Bearcat vehicle smashed through the gilded front doors of the lobby. The Vertex was not just a casino. It was a $4 billion monument to excess, a 60-story tower of black glass and gold that dominated the skyline. It boasted the highest betting limits in the world, the most exclusive nightclubs, and a penthouse suite that cost $50,000 a night. Its owner, Sebastian Valenti, was the modern-day emperor of Sin City, a man who had started as a pit boss and ruthlessly clawed his way to the top of the food chain. He was known for his obsession with security. His casino had more cameras per square foot than the Pentagon. He claimed nothing happened in his building without him knowing. And he was right. He knew exactly what was happening in the fortified complex 3 floors beneath the main vault. The raid, codenamed Operation Royal Flush, involved 140 federal agents from the FBI, SWAT, and the Nevada Gaming Control Board. They didn't come to arrest a tax cheat. They came to dismantle a house of horrors. Sebastian Valenti was in his private office on the 60th floor, watching the raid unfold on a wall of monitors. He was 59 years old, dressed in a tuxedo he hadn't taken off from the previous night's gala. He didn't run. There was nowhere to run. The elevators had been disabled. The helipad was secured by snipers. When Special Agent Marcus Cole kicked open the double doors of the office, Valenti was pouring himself a glass of vintage scotch. "You're bad for business, Agent," Valenti said, taking a sip. His hand didn't shake. "Do you have any idea how much revenue this city is losing every minute you have my floor closed?" Agent Cole, a veteran of the Vice Squad who had spent 5 years trying to pin something, anything, on Valenti, didn't play games. He walked over and slapped the handcuffs on the billionaire so hard it left a bruise. "The house always wins, Sebastian," Cole said. "But tonight, you're cashing out. We found the elevator. We know about the sublevel." Valenti's calm facade cracked for a fraction of a second. "You'll never open it," he sneered. "It's built to withstand a nuclear blast, and the code changes every hour." "We brought a drill," Cole replied. The investigation that led to the raid of the century hadn't started with a missing person report. In Vegas, people disappear every day. They lose their savings, they run from debts, they reinvent themselves. The transient nature of the city was Valenti's perfect camouflage. When a cocktail waitress or a blackjack dealer didn't show up for her shift at the Vertex, management simply marked her as quit without notice. Her locker was cleared out. Her final paycheck was mailed to a dead address. The Las Vegas Police Department, LVPD, had filed 37 such reports over 10 years. Voluntary departure was the standard stamp. But 6 months ago, a tourist from Iowa named Brenda sat down at a $5 blackjack table. She wasn't a high roller. She was a grandmother on vacation. She ordered a gin and tonic. When the waitress brought the drink, she slipped a cocktail napkin under Brenda's hand. The waitress looked terrified. She had a bruise on her wrist that she had tried to cover with makeup. "Don't look at me," the waitress whispered. "Just read it later." Brenda put the napkin in her purse. Later, in her hotel room, she unfolded it. Written in eyeliner were 3 words and a series of numbers. They never leave. B3, 1904 to 21. Brenda took the napkin to the police. It would have been ignored, filed away as a prank or a conspiracy theory if it hadn't landed on the desk of Agent Cole. Cole recognized the date, April 19th, 2021. It was the day Elena Russo, a star blackjack dealer at the Vertex, had vanished. She was the face of their ad campaign. Beautiful, sharp, charismatic. Official story. She moved back to Italy. Actual story. She had rejected Sebastian Valenti's advances at a private party. Cole started digging. He bypassed the local police, whom he suspected were on Valenti's payroll. He went federal. He analyzed the blueprints of the Vertex. The architectural plans filed with the city showed a high-security storage area on basement level 3, B3. It was labeled as a vault for high-value chips and cash reserves. But Cole checked the power consumption records. The cooling system for B3 was drawing 10 times the power of a standard vault, and the sewage lines showed biological waste output coming from a floor that was supposed to store inanimate plastic chips. People were living down there. Back at the casino, the tactical team had reached the entrance to the vault. It was a masterpiece of engineering, a circular steel door weighing 20 tons, gleaming under the harsh emergency lights. "Drill is set," the breach commander shouted. This wasn't a movie. They couldn't guess the code. They had brought a thermal lance and a diamond-tipped industrial drill used for mining. The noise was deafening as the drill bit into the steel. Sparks showered the marble floor of the secure lobby. It took 45 minutes to breach the primary lock mechanism. Inside the penthouse, Valenti sat handcuffed to a chair, watching the feed. For the first time, beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. "There is oxygen down there," he muttered. "If you breach the seal improperly, the pressure change could harm the assets." "Assets?" Cole asked, leaning in. "Is that what you call them?" "They are the finest collection in the world," Valenti whispered, almost to himself. "I saved them from mediocrity. I gave them a home where they would never age, never fade." "They're human beings, you sick son of a bitch," Cole said. The radio crackled. "Breach successful. The door is opening." Agent Cole watched the monitor. The massive steel door groaned, the hydraulics hissing as it swung outward inches at a time. The agents raised their rifles, expecting armed guards. But there were no guards inside. Valenti didn't trust anyone with his collection. The vault was automated. As the door opened fully, the agents didn't see stacks of cash. They saw a long corridor lined with red velvet and gold mirrors. It looked like a twisted version of a backstage dressing room. The air was perfumed, thick and sweet, masking the smell of recycled oxygen. And then, they saw them. Standing in the hallway, frozen in fear, were women. They were dressed in the signature uniforms of the Vertex, the dealers in their black vests, the waitresses in their red corsets, the showgirls in their feathers. But the uniforms were tattered. Some were mended with thread. The women were pale, their skin translucent from years without sunlight. They shielded their eyes from the tactical flashlights, cowering against the velvet walls. "FBI, you're safe!" an agent shouted. One woman stepped forward. She was wearing a Blackjack dealer's vest. Her name tag read Elena. She looked exactly like the missing poster from 5 years ago, but her eyes were haunted, ancient. She looked at the agents, then pointed a shaking finger toward a door at the end of the hall. "Don't go in there," she whispered. "The roulette room. He's watching." Agent Cole stared at the screen. 37 women. They hadn't quit. They hadn't moved away. They had been taken down an elevator and locked in a gold-plated dungeon to serve as the personal staff for Valenti's private twisted games. And the roulette room was where the game turned deadly. Agent Cole signaled the breach team to stand down and pushed open the double doors to the roulette room himself. He had seen crime scenes in Vegas for 20 years, mob hits in the desert, overdoses in penthouse suites, but nothing prepared him for the psychological sadism of Sebastian Valenti's private playground. The room was circular, draped in heavy black velvet. In the center sat a custom-made mahogany roulette table. But the wheel was different. It didn't have numbers 0 through 36. The slots on the wheel were labeled with conditions: no light, no water. The suite. Solitary. The show. This wasn't a game for money. It was a game for survival. Valenti, The man who obsessed over odds and probability had gamified the lives of his 37 captives. Every Sunday, he would come down to the vault. He would line the women up, and he would spin the wheel. If the ball landed on no light, the entire B3 level would be plunged into total darkness for 24 hours. If it landed on the suite, one woman, the winner, would be taken to the luxury quarters to serve Valenti personally for the week. It was a system designed to break their solidarity. They were forced to root against each other. "Secure the evidence," Cole ordered, his voice thick with disgust. "Don't touch the wheel. I want fingerprints on that ball." As the medics began triage in the hallway, the full scope of the operation began to emerge from the digital logs found on a tablet left on the dealer's podium. Valenti hadn't just snatched women off the street. That would have been sloppy. He had hunted them inside his own building. The Vertex employed over 4,000 people. The turnover rate in Vegas hospitality is notoriously high. Valenti exploited that chaos. The logs revealed the recruitment pattern. It was terrifyingly simple. Valenti targeted employees who had no family in the state, women who had moved to Vegas alone to chase a dream. Elena Russo, the Blackjack dealer, was the perfect example. She had come from a small town in Ohio. She was single. She lived in company housing. On April 19, 2021, she was tapped on the shoulder by the pit boss during her shift. "Mr. Valenti wants to see you in the high-limit lounge," he had said. "Big promotion." Elena thought she had made it. She went up to the lounge. She was given a glass of champagne, a vintage worth $2,000 a bottle. The champagne was laced with a potent paralytic agent. She didn't wake up in a hospital. She woke up in level B3, wearing her uniform, with a headache that felt like a drill. When she tried the elevator, it didn't move. A voice came over the intercom, Valenti's voice. "You have been promoted, Elena," he said. "You are now part of the permanent collection. The rules are simple. Be beautiful, be obedient, and never bet against the house." The casino above them continued to operate 24/7. The noise of the slot machines, the cheers of the craps tables, it all vibrated through the steel beams, a constant reminder to the women below that the world was just feet away, yet completely unreachable. Valenti had created a perfect ecosystem. The women were given credits for good behavior. They could use these credits at vending machines in the vault to buy essentials: toothpaste, soap, aspirin, sanitary products. To survive, they had to work. They had to deal cards to empty chairs while Valenti watched on cameras. They had to perform dance routines in the roulette room. They had to maintain the illusion of a bustling, high-end casino that existed only for an audience of one. "Agent Cole," a forensic technician shouted from the back of the facility. "You need to see this. The discard room." Cole walked past the rows of terrified survivors who were sipping water and staring blankly at the armed agents. He reached a heavy steel door marked Waste Management. Inside, he found a chute. It was an industrial laundry chute, large enough for a body. It led directly to the casino's massive incinerator in the sub-basement, used to burn trash, playing cards, and sensitive documents. The logbook on the wall next to the chute had 2 entries. Subject 12, expired, 2/14/2018. Subject 24, expired, 11/3/2020. There were originally 39 women. 2 hadn't made it. 1 had died of an untreated infection. The other had taken her own life using a shard of a broken mirror. Valenti had disposed of them like used decks of cards. He simply dropped them down the chute and burned the evidence. Cole felt a rage so intense his vision blurred. He keyed his radio. "Do not let Valenti talk to his lawyers," he growled. "Gag him if you have to. He's not just a kidnapper, he's a double murderer." Back in the penthouse, Sebastian Valenti was watching the raid on the monitor, but his expression had changed. The arrogance was gone. He was frantically typing on a secure laptop, trying to initiate a purge protocol. He wasn't trying to delete the videos of the women. He was trying to delete the financial records of the B3 level. Because keeping 37 people alive in a secret bunker cost millions. Food, specialized air filtration, medical supplies. And Valenti hadn't paid for it all himself. Agent Cole knew how casinos worked. Even billionaires have investors. Even emperors have silent partners. As the FBI cyber team seized the laptop before the purge completed, they saw the transfer logs. Valenti had been selling shares in his collection. Crypto transfers, offshore accounts. There were spectators, men who paid to access the live feed of the roulette room, men who placed bets on where the wheel would land. Will Elena get the sweet or no light? Place your bets. The Vertex wasn't just a prison. It was a reality show for the darkest corner of the dark web. And the IP addresses of the gamblers were bouncing off servers in Macau, Dubai, and Washington, D.C. As the medics began to move the 37 women out of the vault and into the waiting ambulances, Elena Russo stopped at the door. She looked back at the roulette room. She saw Agent Cole standing by the wheel. "Officer," she rasped, her voice unused to speaking above a whisper. Cole turned. "Yes, Elena?" "The wheel," she said, pointing a trembling finger. "It's rigged. It has a magnet under the no-light slot. He always made us lose on holidays." Cole looked at the wheel. He reached under the table. He found the switch. Even in his own sick, twisted game, Valenti couldn't play fair. He had to control the outcome. "He's not going to control anything ever again," Cole promised her. But as Elena walked out into the cool desert night, seeing the neon lights of the Strip for the first time in 5 years, she knew the game wasn't over. Valenti was just the pit boss. The whales, the high rollers who bet on their suffering, were still out there. And they had a lot of money to make this disappear. The morning after the raid, Las Vegas woke up with a hangover it couldn't sleep off. The stock price of Valenti Resorts plummeted 74% in pre-market trading, wiping out $2 billion in value before the opening bell. The Nevada Gaming Commission suspended the Vertex's license indefinitely. The neon lights on the tower were dark for the first time in history. But while the public was fixated on the fall of an empire, Agent Marcus Cole was sitting in a secure SCIF, sensitive compartmented information facility, at the FBI field office, staring at a list that made him want to burn the city down. The cyber forensics team had cracked the encryption on Valenti's Spectator network. It wasn't just a live feed. It was a fully functional sportsbook. Valenti had created a platform called The Pit. Access was by invitation only. The buy-in was $5 million in cryptocurrency, and the users didn't use names. They used card suits: Ace of Spades, King of Diamonds, Jack of Clubs. Cole scrolled through the transaction logs. The whales, the term for the highest rollers, were placing prop bets, proposition bets, on the daily torture of the 37 women. Bet ID 8940, $50,000 that subject 9, Elena, will cry before noon. Bet ID 8941, $100,000 that subject 12 enters the no-light phase for 3 days without speaking. They were betting on human suffering like it was the Super Bowl, Cole whispered to his partner. Look at the timestamps. These bets were placed from IP addresses in Silicon Valley, Wall Street. And is that a judicial district in Chicago? While Cole built the map of the co-conspirators, Sebastian Valenti's legal team went on the offensive. His lawyer was Vincent the Viper Moretti, the man who had kept mob bosses out of prison in the 90s. Moretti stood on the courthouse steps, wearing a suit that cost more than an average American's car, and looked straight into the cameras. "My client is an eccentric artist," Moretti declared, his voice smooth as silk. The underground facility was an immersive, avant-garde performance piece titled The Cost of Luck. The women were paid performers. The incinerator story is a fabrication by the FBI to justify an illegal warrant. Mr. Valenti will be exonerated. It was the Vegas defense: deny reality, dazzle the jury, and bet that the prosecution blinks. But Agent Cole had a witness who wasn't blinking. Elena Russo sat in an interview room. She was wrapped in a blanket drinking tea. Her hand still shook from the withdrawal of adrenaline, but her mind was sharp. She was a dealer. She knew how to count cards, and she knew when someone was bluffing. "I can tell you who they are," Elena said, looking at the list of anonymous screen names Cole showed her. "How?" Cole asked. "They used avatars." "Because Valenti loved to brag," Elena replied. "When he drank, he would come to the cage. He would tell us. The King of Diamonds is watching you, Elena. Smile for the senator. The Ace of Spades just lost $1 million on you, Elena. That's the CEO of Redacted." Elena spent 6 hours matching the anonymous handles to the names Valenti had whispered in his drunken stupors. King of Diamonds, a sitting U.S. senator known for his family values platform. Ace of Spades, the founder of a major tech conglomerate. Jack of Clubs, a foreign diplomat with immunity. The web of complicity was staggering. These men hadn't just watched. They had funded the expansion of the vault. They had paid for the soundproofing. They were the shareholders of the prison. As the investigation widened, the whales began to panic. 2 days after the raid, a suicide was reported in a penthouse in Manhattan. A hedge fund manager, identified as the Ten of Hearts, jumped from his balcony. The next day, the King of Diamonds senator abruptly announced his retirement due to health reasons. They were cleaning house, and Valenti was the loose end. In the federal detention center, Sebastian Valenti was placed in protective custody. But in Vegas, money finds a way through any wall. On his 3rd night in jail, Valenti's food tray was delivered by a guard he didn't recognize. Under the mashed potatoes was a note. "Fold, or we fold you." The house. Valenti stared at the note. He knew what it meant. His friends were going to kill him to keep his mouth shut. He demanded to see Agent Cole immediately. When Cole arrived at the cell, Valenti looked like a man who had just lost his last chip. "I want a deal," Valenti hissed. "I want witness protection. I want a new face." "You don't get to negotiate, Sebastian," Cole said. "You killed 2 women. You're going to the chair." "I have the tapes," Valenti said, his eyes desperate. "Not just the streams. The audio. I recorded them. The senator asking me to starve them. The CEO asking for the darkness. I have voice prints. I have bank transfers. I can give you the whole table." Cole paused. He looked at the monster in the orange jumpsuit. He hated him. But he knew that if Valenti died, the whales would escape. "Where are the tapes?" Cole asked. "In the foundation of the hotel," Valenti smiled, a glimpse of his old arrogance returning. "Cast in concrete. Only I know where to drill." The deal was struck, but getting the evidence would be a race against time. The whales had hired private contractors, mercenaries, to find the cash before the FBI did. Cole assembled a team. They were going back to the Vertex, but this time, they weren't looking for people. They were looking for the black box that would bring down the most powerful men in America. As they prepared to move, Elena Russo watched the news from her safe house. She saw the senator's retirement speech. She saw the lies. She turned to the female agent guarding her. "They think the game is over," Elena said, touching the scar on her wrist. "But they forgot the most important rule of the casino." "What's that?" the agent asked. "Cheaters never prosper when the dealer is watching," Elena said, and I saw everything. The recovery of the evidence was a military operation. Based on Valenti's confession, the black box containing the recordings wasn't in a safe or a cloud server. It was embedded inside structural support, Pillar 44B, in the unfinished sub-basement of the hotel. Valenti had poured the concrete himself. Agent Cole and a team of FBI engineers descended into the bowels of the Vertex. They had to move fast. Intelligence reports indicated that a private security firm, hired by the King of Diamonds, was en route to the hotel, with orders to start an accidental electrical fire in the basement that would destroy the pillar. The FBI beat them by 20 minutes. At 2 a.m., the diamond-tipped saw sliced through the reinforced concrete. Deep inside the pillar, wrapped in lead and plastic, was a Pelican case. Inside the case were 4 hard drives. Agent Cole plugged them into a secure air-gapped laptop. He clicked on a file labeled K Diamonds, Audio May 2022 Wave. The voice was unmistakable. It was the senator. "Make it harder, Sebastian." The senator's voice crackled through the speakers, slurring slightly. "Turn off the water in Sector 2. I'll bet you another $100,000 she breaks before Tuesday." Cole closed the laptop. He had the smoking gun. He had the voice of one of the most powerful men in America betting on the torture of an innocent woman. "Get the warrants," Cole said, his voice cold. "Get them all." The arrests that followed were the definition of instant karma. Senator William Claymore, the King of Diamonds, was arrested on the 9th hole of an exclusive country club in Virginia. The cameras were there to capture him dropping his golf club as federal agents swarmed the green. Tech billionaire Julian Thorne, the ace of spades, was pulled off his private jet in Teterboro just minutes before takeoff to a non-extradition country. A foreign diplomat was intercepted by Interpol in Paris. The whales were dragged to Las Vegas to face justice in the same city where they had treated human beings like poker chips. The trial of the United States versus Valenti et al. Began 6 months later. It was held in the Lloyd D. George Federal Courthouse, just a mile from the casino where the crimes took place. The courtroom was packed. The jury was sequestered. Sebastian Valenti, looking gaunt and aged, without his expensive suits and hair dye, sat apart from the other defendants. He had taken the plea deal. He was the government's star witness. For 3 days, Valenti systematically destroyed his former friends. He played the tapes. The courtroom listened in horrified silence as the tech CEO laughed about a woman crying in the dark. They heard the diplomat ask for younger inventory. They heard the senator complain that the game was getting boring. The defense attorneys for the VIPs tried to argue that the tapes were deep fakes, AI-generated fabrications created by Valenti to save his own skin. "These men are pillars of the community," the lead defense lawyer shouted. "They wouldn't engage in such barbarism." Then, Elena Russo took the stand. She wore a simple white dress. She didn't look at Valenti. She looked at the spectators, the men who had watched her suffer from the comfort of their mansions. She pointed at the tech CEO. "You sent a message on June 4th, Elena said, her voice steady. "You asked Valenti to play loud music in the vault so we couldn't sleep. You wanted to see what sleep deprivation did to our coordination." The CEO looked down, unable to meet her gaze. "I didn't sleep for 4 days, Elena continued. "I hallucinated that my mother was in the room. You watched that. You bet on it. You won $50,000. I hope it was worth it." The testimony was devastating. It stripped away the veneer of wealth and power, revealing the sadism underneath. The jury didn't see titans of industry. They saw monsters. The verdict came swiftly. Sebastian Valenti. Guilty. Sentenced to life in prison as per his plea deal, escaping the death penalty, but destined to die in a cage. Senator William Claymore. Guilty on 37 counts of conspiracy to commit kidnapping. Julian Thorne, Tech CEO. Guilty. The diplomat. Guilty, stripped of immunity and sentenced under U.S. law. The sentencing hearing was a national event. Judge Sarah P. Reynolds delivered a statement that would be quoted for decades. "You gentlemen treated life as a game," she said, looking at the sobbing senator. "You thought your money bought you the right to own other people. You thought the odds were always in your favor, but you forgot the most basic rule of justice. Eventually, everyone has to show their cards. I sentence you to consecutive terms totaling 150 years. You will never see the outside of a prison cell. You will die in the dark, just like you forced these women to live." The sound of the gavel hitting the wood was the sweetest sound Elena Russo had ever heard. As the marshals led the weeping billionaires away, stripping them of their Rolexes and cufflinks, the gallery erupted in applause. The house of cards had collapsed. But as the courtroom cleared, Agent Cole stayed behind with Elena. "It's over," he said. Elena looked out the window at the Las Vegas skyline. The lights of the Vertex were still dark. "For them, it's over," she said. "For us, we have to figure out how to live in a world where we know monsters are real." Valenti was shipped to ADX Florence. The VIPs were scattered to maximum security prisons across the country. But the physical legacy of the crime, the massive casino tower, still stood. And hidden in its accounts were billions of dollars that now legally belonged to the 37 women who had survived the roulette room. In Las Vegas, everything eventually gets demolished to make way for the new. But the destruction of the Vertex was different. It wasn't just a renovation, it was an exorcism. 2 years after the raid, the federal government authorized the controlled implosion of the $4 billion tower. No hotel chain wanted to buy it. No gambler wanted to walk on the floor where 37 women had been held captive beneath the tiles. The building was cursed. On a Sunday morning in November, crowds gathered on the Strip, not to gamble, but to watch the monster fall. At 6 a.m., a series of thunderous cracks echoed across the valley. In 12 seconds, the black glass tower that Sebastian Valenti had built to challenge God collapsed into a pile of twisted steel and concrete dust. The roulette room, the high-limit vault, the penthouse, all of it was crushed into rubble. When the dust settled, the sun shone on that patch of land for the first time in a decade. The shadow was gone. Sebastian Valenti watched the demolition from the common room TV at ADX Florence. He did not weep. He sat in his wheelchair, muttering numbers. Prison had not been kind to the emperor. Without his tailored suits, his hair dye, and his power, Valenti had withered. He developed a severe obsessive-compulsive disorder. He would spend hours counting the bricks in his cell, convinced that if he reached a certain number, the door would open. He died in 2029, 3 years into his life sentence, of a massive stroke. His body lay in the prison morgue for 30 days. No one claimed him. The man who had hosted presidents and kings was cremated at the state's expense, his ashes disposed of in an unmarked landfill. He had bet everything on control, and in the end, he controlled nothing. But while Valenti turned to dust, the women he had tried to erase were building new worlds. The asset forfeiture process was the most complex in FBI history. The government seized Valenti's accounts, the land where the casino stood, and the personal fortunes of the whales who had been convicted. The total settlement fund was $4.2 billion. It was divided among the 37 survivors. Each woman received over $100 million. It was wealth beyond imagination, but as Elena Russo told a reporter on the day of the settlement, "I would trade every penny to have those 5 years back. But since I can't, I'm going to use it to make sure no one else loses theirs." Elena didn't leave Las Vegas. She felt that leaving would be running away. She used her settlement to purchase a massive plot of land outside the city. She built the Sunrise Center, a sanctuary for victims of trafficking and exploitation in the hospitality industry. The center offers free legal aid, housing, and trauma therapy. Elena manages the center herself. She walks the halls, not as a victim, but as a CEO. She wears short sleeves, displaying the scar on her wrist like a badge of honor. Valenti thought he was the house, Elena tells the women who come to her for help. But we are the players, and we just changed the game. The other survivors found their own paths to healing. Subject 19, who had been a dancer before her abduction, opened a ballet school in Paris. She teaches girls that their bodies belong to them and, them alone. Subject 4, who had been kept in total silence for weeks at a time, became a vocal advocate for workers' rights, successfully lobbying Congress to pass the Hospitality Safety Act, which mandates panic buttons for all hotel staff and rigorous background checks for VIP guests. The site where the Vertex once stood remained empty for years. Developers were superstitious. Finally, the survivors pooled a portion of their money and bought the land. They didn't build a hotel. They didn't build a casino. They built a park. It is called the Garden of Light. It is designed so that no matter where you stand, you are always in the sun. There are no dark corners. There are no locks. In the center of the park is a sculpture made from the melted-down metal of the vault door. It depicts a bird taking flight, breaking free from a cage. At the base of the sculpture are the names of the 2 women who didn't survive, Maria and Sarah. Fresh flowers are placed there every morning by the park rangers, many of whom are survivors themselves. Agent Marcus Cole retired from the FBI as a legend. He teaches criminal justice now at a university. On the first day of class, he shows his students a poker chip he kept from the Vertex. This, he tells them, is what evil looks like. It looks shiny. It looks expensive. It looks like fun. Your job is to look past the shine and see the cost. On the 10th anniversary of the raid, Elena Russo visited the Garden of Light. She sat on a bench, watching tourists walk through the flowers, oblivious to the horror that had once existed beneath their feet. She closed her eyes and listened. She didn't hear the hum of the air filtration system. She didn't hear the spin of the roulette wheel. She heard birds. She heard wind. She heard the laughter of a child playing near the fountain. She smiled, opened her eyes, and looked up at the vast, open Nevada sky. "You lost, Sebastian," she whispered to the wind. Then she stood up, adjusted her sunglasses, and walked out of the park, stepping into a future that she owned completely. The odds had been stacked against them. The game had been rigged. But in the end, the 37 women had done the one thing the house never expects. They survived, and they cashed out with their souls intact.